Time now for our Wall Street Week daily segment. The host of Wall Street Week, David Westin, joins us as he does every day around this time. And David, a big focus right now on the global economy and one of, I guess, what was once one of the more important economies in the world, at least in Africa, and that was South Africa. But they've been having a lot of troubles as of late.
It's a very important economy there. And it's one of the BRICS, of course, which are going to meet actually in Johannesburg later on this month. And it had been a time that foreign direct investment was going in there. Right now, not so much. They're having a lot of problem with growth and also the capacity, frankly, of the federal government. So we turned to David Malpass. He's the former World Bank president, spent a lot of time down there. We asked him whether, in fact, the private sector could step in for the public sector in South Africa.
It's having severe difficulties, both in terms of growth, but also inflation. The currency's been weakening, and public services are breaking down. So this is electricity and clean water that are so vital to people, and there's a breakdown of the infrastructure. So there's a huge amount of work to be done.
We've seen some reporting, Bloomberg's done some reporting on the private sector having to step in because of those public services failing. Is the private sector able to make up the difference?
I don't think they can. You know, governments are needed in some of the basic infrastructure, the maintenance of transmission lines. In South Africa, they have an electricity company called Eskom, but it's been having difficulties really for 10 or 20 years. It's heavily unionized, very hard to get the maintenance done, and the input, the actual production of electricity sufficient to keep the grid going. And that means that private companies then turn to diesel generators, so you lose your best customers and you're increasing the carbon intensity at the same time.
I know you've spent some time there. You visit, you understand the country. It is a dominant economy in sub-Saharan Africa. It is the only one that's part of the BRICS, so-called BRICS. It was admitted relatively recently. What's gone wrong?
As you look back, they became a free country in independence and had some infrastructure to work with, and then it needed to be maintained and increased. And that's the hard part for governments, to find a political system that really makes decisions on spending, for example, where they often were spending too much on things that weren't working. The flexibility of the labor force is critical. So South Africa needed to really focus on how to have skills for the labor force and then allow the labor force to move around within the private sector. And that got lost over the decades. And so it's a country with giant potential, but really needs fundamental changes at the government level. I don't think the private sector by itself can make up for it.
David, you know the country well. You've spent time there. Is there movement within the government right now to try to adopt some reforms, if I can call it that might address the concerns you have?
They're constantly working on it. President Ramaphosa has been in lots of international meetings looking for ways to pull the country forward. There's an election coming up, so these are some of the topics in the election. But a lot of it is getting the details right in terms of electricity production, electricity distribution and transmission, and also in terms of allowing the private sector to actually create jobs and grow. The tax system is still problematic, and the currency has been weakening. So you've got these core problems that need to be addressed from the top down, from the government side.
The United States, I know, is a major trading partner with South Africa, as is China. What's China's role right now in South Africa?
It's important because it's exporting a lot to the world and to Africa, and also building things. And so it provides loans. But one of the key things is to have them be more transparent so that people know what they're getting for the money. China is a big trader of small goods. And in a lot of Africa, that's really important for them to get the consumer goods that they need for everyday life. So China's an important factor, but I think could do better in terms of transparency and relationships. As we look at Africa, China shows that a country can come from poverty to rapid growth over a period of years. In 1993, China stabilized the currency and then allowed market pricing within the economy. And so they ended up with 10% growth per year. I think African countries could do that, but they would need to make major changes in the way the government interacts with the private sector.
Another country that has come into the news with respect to South Africa is Russia, because the United States has been concerned about what possible relationship there might be between South Africa and Russia. We saw actually in an interview recently with Bloomberg with the head of Nedbank, a big banking holding company in South Africa, concerned that in fact trading relations might be strained with the United States because of Russia. What is the issue? Is South Africa caught between the United States and Russia?
South Africa is playing countries against one another. I think that's a dangerous game. The U.S. needs to show strength and engagement with Africa. That's been lost. The Afghanistan evacuation was a sign and a turning point away as the U.S. moved away from the world. And so this is apparent, and Russia and China step into vacuums. We've seen that in Niger. I was there in March, and the security concerns in Africa are immense, and Russia and China are taking advantage of those. The BRIC Bank that you mentioned is Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and so they and South Africa. So BRICS, I guess we can call it. They are allowed to operate on the international scene equivalent to other international organizations, even though it's a narrow membership of those countries. And so I think there has to be a rethinking also of the international financing system to give less dominance to Russia and China.